And welcome to another recording of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We are back for more news, tech content, and wisdom from the world of marketing. Joining me, my co-host, a marketing speaker and consultant who spent his whole career helping his customers keep their marketing simple but effective. He's the author of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Marketing Plans and the creator of the Roger video series. I give you Mr. Roger Edwards.
Oh, thank you so much. And of course, my co-host is a digital marketing veteran. He's a speaker, trainer, and advisor with nearly three decades of experience who enjoys revealing visual storytelling techniques to help you build better online campaigns faster. I give you Monsieur Pascal Fintoni.
Thank you very much, and thank you to your lovely audience for your support. This is episode 126, Roger.
126. It feels like a milestone, but it probably isn't, but it feels like one.
It is, particularly when we're fighting weather conditions, hay fever, internet connectivity issues, tech problems, and so on. And we keep going. Our role, as you know, all of you, is to be a source of inspiration for all of your marketers, whether that is your full-time occupation or something that has been added onto your busy plate. This is for ideas for your next campaign. This is an update on what's happening. So we have our usual segment in the news. I'm going to ask Roger for his reaction on some of the latest news in the world of marketing. Then we're going to slow things down and go for deep discussions on the content spotlights. And we've got an article for you, and I'll be talking about the recent Google I/O conference and the updates on what's happening in the Google ecosystem. This week in history, always a pleasure to have that trip down memory lane. Marketing, tech, and apps. Have we found anything that can make life easier as a marketer, content creator? And of course, our favorite, your favorite, everyone, film marketing segment. And it was your turn, Roger, to choose the film.
Yeah, and let's face it, Pascal, it's May 2025, and there can only really be one film that we were going to discuss this month, and it is, of course, Mission Impossible 8, Final Reckoning. And is it really the final reckoning?
Well, we can discuss that. But I was looking at the notes because I could not remember when we did the review of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And believe it or not, it was January 2023.
Goodness gracious me. And hopefully one of the things that we can discuss today is why did they change the name from Dead Reckoning Part 2 to The Final Reckoning? Maybe there's some very, very sinister marketing reasons behind that as well.
Can't wait to discuss it, but before we do so, let's start with our first segment, In the News, just after this.
No one, not even WhatsApp, can see or hear personal messages. That's a strapline from the brand new campaign advertising the app's end-to-end encryption and new privacy settings.
Well, Marks & Spencer is expecting a £300 million profit drop following a highly sophisticated cyber attack last month. And listen to this, online orders remain paused, with disruptions likely to continue into July 2025.
Over 75% of small and medium-sized businesses see social media as beneficial, yet 54% struggle to keep up with their content needs, according to research by Verizon and Morning Consult.
Airbnb has relaunched its product, Airbnb Experiences, by creating over a dozen social-only videos highlighting top travel destinations, all searchable on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
At a Social Media Week panel, leaders from Discord and Substack argued that broadcast-style social media has given way to a new kind of platform with tightly knit communities.
IBM is expanding its switch into the B2C space by partnering with influencers and encouraging employees to promote the brand, aiming to connect with new audiences beyond its traditional B2B base.
People hailing an Uber in New York City might find more than a ride. Journey TV is turning back seats into mini cinemas, playing everything from 15-second ads to full-length trailers.
And finally, according to Samsung SmartThings, the home of the future is already here, with AI technology designed to learn user habits, anticipate needs, and create automated routines that require zero effort. Oh. I want to go back to the very first one that you read out, the WhatsApp campaign.
Yep.
No one, not even WhatsApp, can see or hear personal messages. And I'm just kind of reflecting on the journey of WhatsApp, part of the Meta ecosystem, as you know. And WhatsApp has tried so many different ways to secure, more followers, more users, and so on, by adding all manner of gizmos. And actually, our good friend 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗀 always keeps me right about what's happening with WhatsApp. And I'm wondering whether here there's a lesson about sometimes you can try it a bit too hard and actually create more confusion in the marketplace than clarity. And you need often to remind yourselves and your audience the what and the why. See what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that there's two things going on here. I think the simplicity of the message is important, and I think maybe Meta have been guilty of overly complicating things across all of their platforms. In truth, if truth be told, not just WhatsApp. We're talking about Facebook and Instagram, etc. But also, I do think that at the moment there's quite a lot of concern, isn't there, across the world from the sort of security of a lot of these apps that we use from day to day. It doesn't help when the governments of the world are being accused of divulging their war secrets using apps like this, not WhatsApp itself, but a similar system. And I think people are concerned about their privacy, and they're concerned that they've heard stories that data is being scraped. People are listening in onto private conversations. And I think that it's probably a good move for them just to go right back to basics and just to spell it out and saying, nobody can hear us, nobody can see us. What you say, what you do is utterly private. And that's a message that people actually want to hear.
Yeah, and interestingly, they're using billboarding, they're using TV adverts, and they're using traditional media as well for that. But for me, it's this idea of after years and years and years of adding bells and whistles and always asked for, they've kind of gone back to say, actually, the reason why people choose us is the following, and perhaps we should reconnect with that. Let's continue actually our conversation about social media. So you read out the stat: 75% of small and medium-sized businesses do believe that social media can help their business success. 54% struggle with the content bit. And then you've got this interesting kind of comment from the leaders of Discord and Substack saying it may well be that broadcast-style social media, so I think they're targeting the Facebook and the X and all the others of this world, that maybe, what is going to happen is to kind of migrate towards something smaller with more meaningful interaction, and maybe therefore the pressure on keeping up with the content trends won't be as pronounced. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've had this conversation a few times on the podcast these days. When social media started, when Twitter came along originally and Facebook, you had a number of followers. Some people had hundreds of followers, some had hundreds of thousands of followers. But you could almost guarantee that if you posted something, all of those followers would see it. And they would react to it if they wanted to react to it. Where, of course, now we know that all of these social media platforms are governed by really quite complicated algorithms. And, particularly on things like LinkedIn, you can't guarantee that people who follow you are going to see what you post. I mean, I've heard figures for LinkedIn saying, it's maybe less than 30% of your followers or connections, if that's what they're really called, will actually see your post. And it does beg the question of what is the point of actually having followers if hardly any of them ever see what you post? But of course, these businesses have now moved on and they want you to pay extra to advertise, to boost, that's the word, isn't it? Boost your post so that more people see it. And maybe we've got to that sort of balancing point where people are saying, we have to be on social media, but we just don't know how much we need to spend to be seen. We don't know whether it's worth spending to be seen because people tend not to like to be advertised to in a social media setting. So I think it's quite a fine balancing act at the moment. So I think the 75% are seeing the benefits, but I'm not surprised that the figure as to how they actually do it is lower, because I do think people are sitting in meeting rooms saying, how can we actually make this work without having to spend lots of money?
And I think, there's a disconnect. If you look at LinkedIn, I had a conversation yesterday actually with a couple of LinkedIn super users, if you will. And there's a complete disconnect between the official advice from LinkedIn itself. They have a blog and they have video series and so on. They say if you do this, things will go well for you on LinkedIn. So you've got that. You've got the algorithm and actually the behavior from the users, and those three things are just not aligned. It just doesn't work. If you follow the advice from LinkedIn, the algorithm actually doesn't reward you that much, and actually it's just not working. And I think all those platforms, they need to sit down and review the lot. And I think back to our conversation about WhatsApp. I believe that the algorithm has been over-engineered now and needs to be completely stripped down to the bare basics of when Roger Edwards publishes something on LinkedIn, his desire is for his followers who've chosen to follow him to get to see that stuff and not do this bizarre thing where we'll wait for a couple of hours and if people like it, we'll share it to more people and that kind of things. And also this obsession with LinkedIn for me to grow my network by showing what I do to complete strangers. Not even to the very people. So there's all sort of things that they need to sort out big time.
And I think as well, you mentioned these LinkedIn super users. I mean, let's face it, Pascal, there are people on LinkedIn who have made a career out of becoming like LinkedIn gurus, LinkedIn trainers, how to use LinkedIn to market your business. And good luck to them. But I actually think that even they are now struggling. So they'll have their standard to be successful on LinkedIn. You need to do this and you need to do that and you need to post at a certain time or you don't include links or whatever it is. But I actually think that even they probably secretly, and they would never say it in public because it would damage their own personal brands, but even they, I think, are starting to see that it's a little bit, black magic and they don't really understand what's going on. But I think their following and their bravado continues to propel them forward. But I've heard a few of the super users that I know personally saying, it's going on behind the scenes. It's a lot harder than we actually make out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's talk about Airbnb and their campaign. I don't know if you've seen the adverts yet on TV or online. So essentially, it's a very pleasant, Airbnb experiences advert, very animated, but very AI. And I suppose what I'm trying to say here, I'm wondering whether, we're going to see a different form of expression and different form of execution from, let's say, 2D graphics a la Red Bull all the way to the Airbnb AI mini movie, which is really quite, well made, well produced, but very, very AI. And, by the way, just very quickly, let me just tell people, can we please stop with the AI babies all over social media? It's getting quite boring now, everyone. But so I suppose my reflection is the acceptance from the public about blatantly AI produced content, from the written form to the audio form to now the animation stroke advertising. I suppose Airbnb have always tested boundaries. They've always tried different things, but it's such a departure from the lovely adverts where we used to see real photography and real videography. If you see what I mean?
Yeah, again, Airbnb is an interesting case study, isn't it? They were once hailed as almost like the savior of the travel industry, and people were fed up with hotels charging big, ridiculous prices and offering poor service. But I think Airbnb or another of these brands have overcomplicated things. And you hear, well, if you're an Airbnb host, you've got all of these things you need to do, and if you're an Airbnb customer, you've got not only the amount you have to pay to stay there, but you've got the cleaning charges, you've got all the other charges that get lumped in. And now you've almost got that swing back to hotels where people are saying, you know what, Airbnb it's not worth the effort. Let's just go and stay at a travel lodge or stay at a Premier Inn. And I find it fascinating, those sort of cycles. So again, is the way to uncomplicate your message, is the right way to do that, to use something that still looks a little bit fake? I mean, AI is here to stay and it can do incredible things, but there's some things it's still not very good at. And I've even seen on YouTube some people that I know have started using AI to create their thumbnails, and you can tell immediately that these are not real. Some people are even getting AI to create a likeness of themselves. Now on my thumbnails for my YouTube videos, I always use a photograph of me that I've taken from the video that I'm doing. Whereas now you can see some people who have got an AI construct and it looks a bit like them. They've got the same shaped nose and they've got the same beard, but you can tell it's not really them and it just looks fake. And I think you've got to strike that balance. And you don't want to, if you're trying to reposition yourself, and if Airbnb want to make people focus in on the experiences, do you want to create the impression that those experiences are fake? I just don't get it.
Yeah, no, and I think it'll be almost the right message to the right audience at the right time, moments where there'll be some people who will disengage from AI-produced content, and others will be absolutely fine with it, but I suppose the message for me is don't suddenly jump on the AI content bandwagon. Do all of it, if you want to do that. Let me ask you very quickly. So, Marks and Spencer's a warning to us all. So, everybody listening, get your cybersecurity checks in place and so on. It can happen to anybody. IBM moving into the B2C space. I think Roger and I will be looking at this with interest. It'd be very fascinating to see what they do. I want to close quickly on this idea of technology and AI being present. So, Roger, you travel a lot for your work as a speaker and consultant. I'm guessing you'd be using the Uber ride from time to time. Would you be happy to sit at the back and have to endure adverts and trailers?
I mean, no, I wouldn't enjoy that. I think if there were ads playing in an Uber, I would just zone out of them. It's my mind will be on. Am I going to get to the airport in time for this plane? Am I going to get to the station in time for this train? How am I going to? What's the opening for my speech tomorrow morning? How do I interact with the people in the workshop that I'm running? I'm not wanting to see an advert in the back of an Uber. I just think that most people will probably be in the same sort of space. Having said that, if you're in a black cab and they're running adverts on the back seat, and it means that the driver has to stay quiet and not talk about bloody weather or football, then maybe that's a good thing and the adverts would be preferable. I don't know.
No, I mean, one of my best black cab journeys ever. It was many, many years ago going to a conference at the Design Centre in London, and the cab driver was like the Bob Hoskins evil twin. And he looked like him. He had the same accent and so on, but he was so rude, and he complained all the way from King's Cross to the venue. And we were in stitches. I mean, we were crying with laughter with this running commentary, and that's better than watching, a flat screen. I mean, the argument from Journey TV would be that the passenger, going from A to B, will see adverts relevant to their journey, and then they can scan QR code for coupons and that kind of thing. So maybe, but they tried this at airports for many, many years, and that never worked. So good luck to them. And I'm on to now slow things down if we could, and move on to our next segment, the content spotlights. Now, in this part of the show, Roger and I go for a detailed review of a content piece. Could be an article, could be a podcast, could be a video, something that helps us reflect what it means to be a marketer in today's economy. So what have we chosen for episode 126?
Well, this is an article, again, that the headline caught my attention. And I thought this is really fascinating. Now, the actual headline is "Why Clarity is the Real Superpower in Scientific Public Speaking." Now, I'm not a scientist, so I don't do scientific public speaking. And I guess that a lot of people listening to this podcast, if you are speakers, it's very unlikely that you are scientific public speakers. But I think the message that I want to get out of this article, having read it, is that you can learn a lot from the people who do scientific public speaking to help you become a better public speaker when you talk about whatever it is you're talking about, whether you're a marketing public speaker or whether you talk about, cars or whatever it is. I think the thing that I learned from this article is that obviously scientific concepts can be incredibly complicated. And if you are up on your feet talking about those, you have to be able to put it across in an incredibly clear, easy to understand way. Now, I suppose that if you've got an audience of scientists, then you can talk scientist speak to them and they'll probably understand you. But if you are a scientist giving a speech to people who aren't scientists, then if you talk in that scientific language, then they're not going to understand a word you're saying. And that is the superpower, is how can you put across incredibly complicated concepts in language that everybody can understand? And I hope that by just saying that, Pascal, you can immediately understand why this is important for marketers. And we've almost covered this already with a few of those news items, haven't we? Is that we are constantly getting ourselves into that state where we overly complicate our messages to the point where people either don't understand those messages or they turn off and they go somewhere else. So I think we can learn a lot from this article. It's in Forbes magazine, or Forbes, the website. Chiara Alzati is the author. And effectively, they're just saying that effective scientific communication has to be about clarity and connecting. And it's just coming up with that way of putting, whether it's quantum theory or whether it's delta particles or whatever it is, you've got to find a way to make people understand. And I think that heavy detail and complexity can turn off an audience, even an audience that maybe understands what you're talking about. Overly complicating it can turn them off, whereas clarity can make you unforgettable. And in fact, that might be a strapline for any type of public speaker. Clarity makes you unforgettable. So I'm not going to go into massive amounts of detail, because I will, as always, put the link to this in the show notes, and I would encourage everybody to read it. It's not a long article, but the main learning points for me were, first of all, speak to the ear, not just the brain. So again, people have got short attention spans these days. You've got to signpost what you're saying. So use verbal cues like, let's break this down. Ask people questions like, why does this matter? You go on about quantum particles, blah, 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 blah. You get complicated. You stop. Why does this matter? Let's break this down. So speak so that people have those signposts that their ears pick up, rather than the complexity. Lead with relevance. You might go straight into your message rather than giving the history of the theory of relativity at the start of your speech. That's the way to turn people off. Like anything, how can you hook your audience with something really simple and significant? So what is the thing that is going to make them sit up and think, this is why it matters to me? So lead with relevance rather than diving straight into the complexity. Make visuals work for your audience. Now that sounds like the utter Bobby basics, doesn't it? But how many times have you been to a speech, and I have to say I've not been to that many scientific presentations, but I can think of sitting in a room where an accountant has given a presentation, and of course they'll put a slide up with lots of really small writing which they can't read from the front of the room, let alone if you're sat at the back. And isn't it funny how they always say, you probably won't be able to read this slide, and you think, well, why the hell did you put it up then? But make your visuals support what you're doing. And again, it might be a case of not using all the data and the statistics, just use visuals, just use a photograph. And I suppose that takes into the other thing, avoid too much data. Yes, data is important to back up the points you're making, but you don't want to go up on stage and just start bamboozling everybody with reams and reams of data. And again, some of these subjects can be quite dry. How can you turn it into a performance? You know, if it was a play in the theatre or if it was a film, how would you make it exciting? How would you make it resonate? How would you perform it as opposed to just say it? And I think that those are the really interesting points that came out of this article for me. And you know, I have been obsessed with simplicity. I mean, I make it still one of the key things that I talk about when I do marketing speeches is keeping things simple. And I think that we constantly forget to do that. We constantly forget to do that. And if you can keep it simple, then people will listen to what you say and they may act upon what you're saying. And I'll come back to that strap line, which really stood out to me from this article, so that clarity makes you unforgettable.
I love that strap line. But isn't that funny that it is really worth revisiting time and time again? Because the assumption by people who perhaps not familiar with public speaking or would not have the feedback yet would be that actually knowledge is the real superpower in scientific or any form of thing. And the curse of knowledge is a tough one because it's hard sometimes to simplify what you know well. And you can remove the language to use, obviously very, very meaningful. But for me, it's also in our line of work, you know, the abuse of acronyms of all sorts, which are something that I've been kind of fighting against for such a long time. And, you know, in terms of your presentation design, we can go on and on forever, but I still see I was invited to attend a conference about AI in business, and they were introducing the government's kind of skills framework for using AI in business. And the presenters were, you know, scientists, I would say, and researchers from the Alan Turing Institute and from 𝗓𝗲𝗄 and so on. And it was evident because, you know, the way they presented and the slide design and so on was very much a mirror of what they've got in their heads, and they're almost trying to capture it, as opposed to, you know, adapting it to the audience. Now, what was really helpful, however, for all the slides during that presentation where you could say busy or overwhelming and so on, their presentation style was really good. So literally I caught myself just looking at them and taking it in because it was so memorable, and I've forgotten all about the slides and that kind of thing. So it can be done, you know, for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for that selection. And in a way, my selection has a link to that. So last week, the yearly conference hosted by Google took place, a 3-day of presentations and workshops to inform primarily developers, but also marketers about what's changing at Google. And I put the links in the show notes for everybody to watch. Usually the keynote address, which is a couple of hours, is the most important one. And then what you can do, Roger, is choose which bit you want to know more, and you can go into the deep dive sessions afterwards. But if you find that 2 hours is far, far too long, well, you can use an AI summary platform, which we have recommended before in Marketing, Tech and Apps. But also Google gets it, and they have also produced a 10-minute recap, which I've also put the links in the show notes. But for me, my interest with regard to listening to the Google I/O conference is around the impact on the behavior of our customers, and therefore what we can do and what we should prepare for as marketers. That's really always what I'm looking at. And I will say that over the years, Google seems to reveal a little less year after year about what's happening behind the likes of Google Maps and SEO and so on, but you can still get some good stuff. So no surprise there. The whole of the conference had the theme of AI. As you know, Google have launched a few years ago now Gemini, which is their version of, if you wanted to be crude, ChatGPT and all the others. And what they're looking at really, as ever, is what can they do to give everybody, regardless of preferences, access to the world's knowledge, and what can they do in terms of using AI to make one's personal and professional life better. Now, that's been kind of the inference. So I'm looking at my notes because I'm still digesting everything that they've said, but search is going to change quite a bit. So the search behavior. And what they've introduced primarily is, so currently, as you know, Roger, you have to decide whether you're going to go on Google or you're going to go on Gemini. You literally have to go onto two different kind of platforms, and people sometimes have two different tabs. When in future, I'm guessing for the desktop version, it's just starting in the US to be rolled out for the rest of the world. There will be an extra tab alongside, the maps and the news and the images and so on. There'll be an extra tab called AI mode. And if you click on that, you'll have essentially the Gemini experience. But what they are promising is to be able to do some deep research. And more importantly, where to date, the research is being shown to you if you use ChatGPT, Perplexity, and all the others, Claude, Meta, Copilot, mostly if you do any form of work, it's all text-based. You get a long kind of article, whatever it might be. With AI mode on Google/Gemini, you're going to get infographics, you're going to get audio summaries, you're going to get video summaries. You're going to be like a multi-model experience within that way. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're going to have a situation which is already happening quite a bit, where people are going to go on Google to search for information about your business and maybe your products and services, but they will not need to go on your website. They will not need to go on your LinkedIn profile and so on and so forth, because everything will be summarized here. Now, on one hand, this is disappointing. You could say, well, I worked very, very hard, Pascal, to get my website to be top notch. I want visitors. I say, well, that's not the way of the future. But more importantly, please understand that's something we covered, of course, in episode 125. If you've not taken the trouble to produce information that can essentially be the premise of those AI summaries, you will become very quickly invisible on the web. So that's probably the number one change, this AI mode that's going to give people a multimedia summary, and they won't need to go into your website. A couple of things that we can look forward to. In no particular order, you'll now be able to sketch what you have in mind. For example, your next, maybe a marketing campaign. You can sketch on a piece of paper. You can scan that, and then Gemini can transform this into pretty much a digital prototype, which I thought was very, very impressive. Meetings, I must confess, I've not used Google Meet for a very long time. I don't know about you, Roger, but I tend to stick to Zoom, and if my public sector customers insist, I'll go on Teams. But Google Meet could be interesting. They're going to essentially introduce 3D rendering of the participants. So, currently, even though the video is actually quite clear, although I would say perhaps they should spend more money on HD on Google Meet. But ultimately, you'll be able to see people in 3D within that window. And there's going to be live translations. So literally, I could be speaking to you in French, Roger, and you'll hear me in English. And vice versa, you could be speaking to me in English, Roger, and I'll hear you in French. And that's really crazy for exporters and people with the national teams and so on. Now, of course, Google and Gemini is all about productivity. So we're going to see more and more, I suppose, the agent or the assistant being imposed upon us if you're using any of the Google Android systems and whatever. But the one thing that they are promising is that they're going to use AI to help us get things done. From search, they show an example where you could get an email from maybe a client, Roger, or from a contact asking you a question, and your agent be able to scan through your Gmail account, scan through your Google Drive account, and so on, and therefore find the knowledge that you have amassed over the years and formulate a reply for you to check and send. So that could be quite interesting for sales proposals, for example, and that kind of things. We're able to do more camera and screen sharing, but then we move, of course, into content creation. And Google have really put a lot of effort and investment into both image and video creation. So according to people who've done a lot of tests out there, the image creation platform is just the best out there and starting to look a lot less like AI. So, we shall see. But in terms of video, which is of interest to you and I, they have two products, one called VO3. So there's 1 and 2 currently available, but 3. And what VO3 can do against a description, they will not only put together the animated image, moving image, if you will, Roger, but they will also add dialogues and background noises. So if you were to describe, for example, somebody, which they've done on the boat, kind of reciting a poem, then you will be able to hear it, you'll be able to see and hear the waves moving and so on and so forth. So something super realistic. But the one that is perhaps more relevant to marketers is one called Flow, where you can upload your own video clips and your own photography, and then you can write a script, and then these assets will be used to be able to put together an advert of sort or a visual story. There's lots more going on, a lot more announcements, so please do look at in the show notes for the hyperlinks. But ultimately, what we have here is a situation where the life of our customers is going to be made a lot easier when they are searching. In parallel, we're going to have some productivity gains in terms of marketers, and we may have some creativity gains in terms of marketers, but the rules have not changed since the late 90s, Roger. You've got to produce relevant content.
This is really interesting. That the first reaction to me for this is that you do this every year, this recap of the of the Google conference, and it's just scary how quickly these seem to come around, because we've been doing Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast for 4 or 5 years now, so this is the 4th or 5th time you've done it, and I think it can't be time for that again, surely. I did actually see some footage created by that VO3 thing the other day, and it was actually of a car chase down the streets of Chicago or New York or something with vintage cars from the 1920s. And as you say, it had added the sound effects of tires squealing, and I think they were shooting Tommy guns at each other, so it was probably a gangster thing from the 1930s. But yeah, it was scarily realistic, and you think, how far away are we from entire films being made like this? It's really interesting. But yeah, from the marketer's point of view, I think you're absolutely spot on with your message.
Yeah, thank you very much. So listen, it's all happening in the US only for now. There'll be a rollout. But, you and I always say, part of being a wise marketer is to pay attention to your customers' preferences and behavior. And if it is changing because the platforms that they are using are changing, we've got to pay attention.
Absolutely.
Now, as we say many a time doing, Two Geeks and Marketing podcast, none of this would be possible without the hard work and vision of pioneers of the recent and distant past. It is time to move on to our next segment, This Week in History.
In 1937, the first shopping cart is introduced at the Humpty Dumpty supermarket in Oklahoma City. It was invented by the store owner Sylvian Goldman, who based his invention on the folding chair.
Right. Well, in 1940, the British Army completes the miracle of Dunkirk by evacuating over 338,000 Allied troops from France via a flotilla of over 800 vessels, including Royal Navy destroyers, merchant marine boats, fishing boats, pleasure crafts, and even lifeboats.
In 1984, Columbia Records releases Bruce Springsteen's 7th studio album, Born in the USA. His biggest commercial success topped the charts in 11 countries and sold over 30 million copies worldwide.
Wow. In 2011, Justin Kan and Emmett Shear, the founders of Justin.tv, a live streaming platform, launched Twitch.tv, the now famous video game live streaming service and esports competitions hub. Shopping cart, I thought they were around forever.
It's funny when I read this, and again, it just goes to show my head went straight to the little shopping cart icon you get in the corner of Amazon or whatever it is. You're buying online and you click on your cart, don't you? But of course, this is 1937. You're actually talking about the trolley that people push around supermarkets. But it just goes to show that my head is tech-based as opposed to, well, I suppose that's technology as well, but online tech, digital tech as opposed to physical tech.
No, but it's interesting that should be the item or the invention that symbolizes commerce, online and offline. But in my head, I thought you would have read that the day was 18 something or whatever, the shopping cart, and therefore, I mean, I just love the name of the shop, Humpty Dumpty. So this store owner observed customers going around this store, huffing and puffing as they were holding the baskets in their hands, or they're trying to And so there's got to be a better way. And I think for me, that's what marketing, tech, and apps as a segment is all about. Somebody somewhere observed something and felt that's not good enough, or there must be a better way. And to find that there was something that they could relate. The folding chair. And he himself, reading from some of the research, then invented the bit where the trolley now you've got the back or that can fold onto itself, so you can essentially concertina all them and store the shopping carts without wasting too much space. I cannot believe that this is, of course, the date in 1940 of Miracle of Dunkirk, which is just quite incredible. And I always feel very moved when I hear the story or watch any of the movies that kind of talk about it. But you are the ultimate music fan as part of this duo. So tell me more about Bruce Springsteen and Born in the USA.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that this reached out to me, there's a musical reference, is that obviously Bruce Springsteen's recently been having a spat with President Trump, and anybody who's having a spat with President Trump is okay in my book. I mean, Bruce Springsteen's just one of those people who's just been around forever, and you think, God, goodness gracious me, this is a 40-year-old album now, and yet it still sells, and people still listen to it, obviously a lot on the likes of Spotify and Apple Music, etc., etc. And I guess we're at that point now where there are so many albums from the 80s that are approaching their 40th anniversary. I've had quite a few of them in the last few years. Vienna by Ultravox, Duke by Genesis. Obviously, there's this one. There's plenty of other albums from the 1980s which just are standout albums that still stand up today against some of the AI slop that we're getting. And I just think it's absolutely fascinating, the endurance of these. But I wanted to segue a little bit into even, a music album needs good marketing. Now, another group that I'm very keen on and have been for a long time is a group called Sparks. Now, Sparks have been around since the early 1970s, and it's a couple. It's a couple of brothers from the LA, Ron and Russell Mael, and they hit the big time with an appearance on Top of the Pops back in 1974 with a song called This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us. And the sort of uproar at the time is that Ron Mael, who's the keyboard player, actually has like a little black mustache, and he was sat there looking very deadpan, playing his piano, wearing a suit and tie. And this guy at the time was in his sort of mid-20s, but he looked as if he was in his late 50s. And everybody thought, "Oh my God, he looks like Adolf Hitler." And I can remember my father sitting there saying, "What the hell is this? Who are these two?" And of course, that song propelled them into fame, and interestingly, Sparks have never been massively successful in the States, but as a result of that Top of the Pops appearance nearly 50 years ago, they have been very popular in the UK. And that's a long preamble to the fact that they have just launched their 28th, can you believe it, 28th album.
Goodness.
It came out last week. It's called Mad with an explanation mark. And these two guys are nearly in their 80s. Ron Mael, the guy who looks like Adolf Hitler, and he still has that little mustache, is nearly 80, and Russell is, I think he's 76. And I've been fascinated recently by watching the marketing for this new album. They have been everywhere. I've seen it on social media. They're absolutely nailing the social media with doing personal appearances, and they're doing TikTok and short videos and Instagram videos. They did a sort of 2-hour interview with Rob Brydon in a church in somewhere like Cardiff or Bristol, which appeared on YouTube last night. And it's 2 hours, Pascal, and Trisha and I started watching it quite late, actually, and in the end I had to turn it off because it was getting very late. But they are absolutely mesmerizing with the stories of 50 years in the charts. And whilst this is nothing at all to do with Bruce Springsteen, it just shows that a couple of guys who are in their 80s can produce 28 albums over a period of 50 years and still be relevant and still understand how to market their content to their audience. And I don't want to put a jinx on this, and I've got my fingers incredibly crossed, but the music critics reckon that when the album charts are announced today, that album will be #1 in the United Kingdom. A couple of 80-year-olds. I think that's just fabulous. And it's not just the fact that it's great music, it's also the fact that they get the marketing of it. And honestly, I might even do it as a content spotlight in a future episode, how they've marketed this new album, because to me, it really stands out.
Well, I think you should, and our viewers and listeners, I'm sure, agree with us. But do you know what is interesting is this idea of being have a clear understanding of the tools of the time, but know what it takes to engage an audience. And they can remember a time before the internet. They can remember a time before, people say it's just dropped on Spotify, which I think is I detest the expression of dropping anything. But 1984, I can visualize the album cover of Born in the USA. It's that, symbolic. But 1984, should I say, is also exciting, because for me, it was the release of Purple Rain with my ultimate, hero, Prince. And talk about marketing, you had the album, you had the movie, you had the tour. And of course, back in the 80s, for younger viewers and listeners, if we have any, back in the way albums were promoted was what you released a few singles first to whet the appetite of the audience, and literally you'd be to the state of frenzy to buy the entire album of Born in the USA or Purple Rain or whatever. So in the case of Purple Rain, it was When Doves Cry was into the radio station, because that was the only way you could get someone to listen to. There was no other ways. And if you made it into the top 40, the top 20, the top 10, or the top of the pops, then that was your marketing vehicles. But this idea of releasing a few singles first, and then people bought them as well. Everybody listening, you bought the singles first, and then you bought the album as well, and then you bought the remixes later on. So it was just a wonderful time to be around for music.
Interesting, you should say that. But we're not wanting to preempt maybe a future content spotlight, but with the way Sparks marketed this new album was by releasing singles, albeit in digital format, but with different sort of rappers and this, that, and the other. And they started way back in December, and I think they've released about 4 songs from the album, but doing it in the traditional way that we used to do 50 years ago, but updating it for the digital world. And it's worked, because the anticipation that were built up to that launch date last week was huge, because they effectively did that marketing in advance.
Yeah, superb. Very, very quickly, before we move on to the next segment, twitch.tv. Actually, you and I did explore the option of having the audio and video magazine on twitch.tv as well, because there was a time. But business lesson in this, so Justin.tv was essentially a video diary platform. I think 2011, I'm not sure whether the term vlogging was around, but it was a platform where you could go in and upload pretty much what you were doing in your day-to-day, almost like a counter to YouTube. But then Justin and the founders thought of it and say, I think we need to narrow it down. We need to narrow the scope, because we're going nowhere with this. And the moment they chose to go for the gaming kind of community, it just went through the roof. And actually, they, as you know, got bought by Amazon. It's now an Amazon product, twitch.tv. But you can still do, let's say, podcast sessions on twitch.tv. But I also think it was an interesting one that was literally 14 years ago that Justin.tv was launched. I remember seeing it online. But the fact that they made that decision to narrow the scope of what this was all about, and through their success, really.
Yeah, I mean, there are some incredibly successful people on Twitch, probably spend their entire day sitting in front of their computer playing games and broadcasting it live on Twitch, and they have millions and millions and millions of followers.
Yeah. And I remember having a conversation with some friends who just could not understand why would anyone watch somebody else play a game. They would say to me, well, why don't people play the game? I said, well, they do that too. But people play the game and then they watch somebody else play the game, and the look on their faces was just wonderful. But it's just, people have different ways to spend their time and connect with each other. On the subject of tech, let's get back into the present with our next segment, Marketing, Tech and Apps. So, Roger, what wonders from the interweb have you discovered recently?
Well, this is all about a sort of about memberships, I think. One of the things that some people do if they run YouTube channels, and of course I do run a YouTube channel, is that they have a sort of associated membership with it. It's a way you can earn a little bit more money. It's a way that you can create a community of people who follow you. And YouTube offers a way of creating a membership community within the YouTube platform. And I don't run a membership platform for my YouTube channel. It's not something that I've really looked into in much detail, but I was very interested with somebody recently complaining about the fees that YouTube charge their creators for running these membership add-ons. And effectively, YouTube take 30% of what you earn if you use their membership functionality. So when you set up a membership on YouTube, you can add tiers. So you could be, for example, a bronze member, and you could charge those people £1.99, and you could then have a silver tier, which gives people access, say, to your videos before everybody else, and that's £4.99 a month, and blah blah blah. You could have as many membership tiers as you want, but YouTube take 30% of that. And this person was having a bit of a rant that 30% is rather a lot. It just got me interested to see what the alternatives were, because one of the platforms that a lot of people use is something called Patreon. Don't know whether you've come across that, Pascal,
Yeah.
but people use Patreon not only for YouTube, but for podcasts and even blogs. People can have Patreon accounts, and you can set up a similar sort of thing. It's like a membership. People have membership levels. You can charge again anything you like. You can have different levels of tiers, and interestingly enough, Patreon take between 5 and 12% of what you earn, depending upon the level that you want to go to. So, for example, if you want the free account, they'll take 5%, but your functionality is rather limited. And then there are certain levels of paid that you can go to, up to the 12% tier, where effectively you have an account manager and a technical person who can help you. And that means you can have secret videos and all sorts of extra functionality, and I'm not sure in my head what I feel is a reasonable figure, but between 5 and 12% feels more fair than 30, I have to say. But this sort of then, of course, led me into a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I dived in and said, well, what other options are there available? So another one I came across is called 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃. And actually that reminded me, because when I actually went onto the 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃 website, a password actually came up in my Google box when I went onto the website. So I actually have joined 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃 at some point in the past. My account has long since been deactivated, but the password still worked, and it just said you're no longer a member, or we don't know who you are. But 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃 again is similar sort of thing. I think the functionality isn't as broad as Patreon, but you can still do tiers of memberships, and they just take a flat 5% full stop. The most popular one sounds the same. It's actually called Ko-fi. Obviously a riff on 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃, but it's Ko-fi, Ko-fi, and that is quite a simple website, and they take 5% as well. So it did get me thinking, there's a massive gulf between 30% that YouTube charge and 5% which you can get from Ko-fi. Now, obviously some people may think that there's a massive benefit running a membership on the platform where you have your subscribers. And I can see the logic in that for somebody wanting to, who has maybe hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. It makes sense for their membership platform to be on the YouTube platform as well. But I'm thinking 30%? Seriously, when you can get it something very similar for 5%? Or is it just too much to ask people to hop from one to the other? So Pascal, my question to you really is, how much do you think a membership site should cost? And is it worth paying 30% to have that on the same platform as your subscribers? Or would you be willing to move somewhere to like Ko-fi or Patreon for a lower amount?
Well, actually, the reason I would move to the lower amount because of Patreon and Coffee, that's what they've been designed to do. And the goodwill and the warmth that you could literally sense via, albeit via the ones and zeros of the internet, is so evident to me, because you and I actually have donated in the past to Coffee. We did a film marketing review, and the name of the movie escapes me. And one of our findings was someone who had done the research on TV and radio spots. And thanks to that gentleman, we were able to do an even better film marketing review. So we donated via Coffee, and then I'm on a couple of Patreons, and that's what they're designed to do. And I think they're very respectful of the creators, but also very respectful of their network. That to me would be the argument, because I think with what you described of YouTube, it feels like it's just being shoehorned in and not particularly well thought out or designed with that particular, and why 30%, not 25 or 20, or even just a grading order depending on the performance of your account. It just feels like they've not thought about this one. Just went, well, we'll go for that. And then there could be an element of arrogance as well. Say, well, they need us more than we need them, that kind of things.
Yeah. So what's your tech this week, Pascal?
So I want to share some updates on two platforms that we have mentioned before, but those updates are really quite exciting. And it's all to do with this business of people wanting to access AI summaries, whether that's through a search engine or more. So Headliner has been mentioned a few times now on the show, and we use them on occasion here now to create those audiograms where you get some 10-minute segments of the show. But they have released recently in beta something called TLDL. Now, people will know about the TLDR, too long did not read. And this one is TLDL, too long did not listen. And what you can do, you can literally, through a drop-down option, select one of our episodes. So I went for episode 125. And what you can do is set a time length for this summary. So I went for 10 minutes. And literally you get a kind of curated version of your full show, mixing real clips. So you and I are talking with AI narration. And I have to say, it's pretty good. Now, the AI voice could be better. I think I've been spoiled by listening to a lot of the Google AI voices, which are so much better. But this idea of an introduction by AI to the show, then literally words like, let's listen to Roger's comments on the GWR campaign, and then there's like a 2-minute segment. Let's listen to Pascal talking about this. So there's that, real life, real clips of the show interspersed with AI narration, and to give people a teaser version of flavor of what the full audio video magazine is about. Now, this is brand new. I've not really worked out the practical application, perhaps apart from gifting teaser versions to customers and so on. Currently, all you can do is share the hyperlink to the audio summary. You can't download it just yet to then use it to publish on your own kind of, in our case, Captivate account. But I just think it's an interesting way of mixing the real content, the real footage, with some little kind of AI audio hooks in between. I think this is very, very, very promising, and might actually be more successful than the audiograms, which was this kind of animated, wave charts onto it. So Headliner, TLDL, give it a go, everyone. Let us know what you think. And then the platform that's been on the show now a couple of times is Notebook.lm by Google. So you can do, in terms of summaries, you can do FAQs on a number of things from your website to your own kind of content. You can do briefing notes. You can, of course, do audio summaries. By the way, they're now available in multiple languages. Now, we have the English language, although it's still US English. If they could work on the UK version, that'd be so much better. But you can do French, Spanish, you can do all sort of things. But the one thing they've introduced recently is mind mapping. And that can be very, very helpful. If you upload, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 different documents to get a summary, sometimes even the summaries can be very, very busy and bloated. And perhaps what you need is a mind map. So 𝗏𝗶𝘀 have introduced a mind mapping as part of their free service. So there we are. Headliner, TLDL, and 𝗏𝗶𝘀 mind mapping for your summaries.
I might have a look at the mind map. I used to be a big mind mapper. Nothing better than getting a huge piece of paper and drawing a circle and a word in the middle, and then all of those spokes and bubbles that used to come off it. I've tried mind mapping software, but I've never ever been able to do it digitally. And you can't beat doing a mind map on paper. It's just, I'll definitely have a look at that and see what it looks like.
No, you must. You enjoy it. And have a listen to the audio summary as well from Headliner, see what you make of it. It's time to move on to our final segment, the one that we always look forward to, film marketing, just after this. So, Roger, you chose Mission Impossible, not Dead Reckoning Part 2, not Mission Impossible 8. It is Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. Let's watch the trailer.
This can't all be true.
Every word.
CIA Black Vault break-in.
Am I reading this correctly? The Kremlin bombing?
In fairness, the bomb was actually meant to kill him.
He gassed a security briefing.
That was just 2 months ago.
This explains the handcuffs. It's still not clear why he's here. If we want to bring the world back from the brink, we have to deal with him. Should he choose to accept?
Smart people on every side are close to panicking.
What exactly is your plan?
Your team has been betrayed, Ethan. All your secrets compromised.
Everything you are, everything you've done, has come to this. You gave him an aircraft carrier?
Our lives are the sum of our choices. This was your calling, your destiny. I have no regrets. Neither should you.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
Well,
the thing is, I chose this film, Pascal, but I haven't seen it yet, but you have.
I have indeed.
But that trailer makes me want to see it, obviously.
So, I mean, can we just quickly talk about this idea of I need you to trust me one last time? I mean, I know it's kind of obvious what they've done here, but of course it's addressing the audience. Of course it's addressing the movie theaters and the distributors, the sales agent, the PR people. And of course it's addressing, the characters in the movie, because this is a scene for the movie. But I just think on one hand it could be quite corny, but I mean, let's say, of course, I need you to trust me one last time, because it is the last time. This is Final Reckoning. And I was kind of jesting earlier about the different titles, because we knew this years ago about as Mission Impossible 8, Then we had Dead Reckoning Part 1 2 years ago. So then the assumption was this was going to be Part 2, and this was changed to Final Reckoning. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during that meeting where they went, I don't think we could stick with Dead Reckoning Part 2, because I may suggest a Part 3, or they may not suggest the finality of the franchise. Let's go for Final Reckoning. I mean, how do you feel about the title?
I'm not sure, actually, because the problem is that Dead Reckoning Part 1 exists. I guess one of the questions in my head is, will they retcon that by going back and changing all the prints so that all of the prints that are out there in movie land will now say Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, full stop, no Part 1. A bit like that when they went back and changed Star Wars from just being Star Wars to Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Do you think they'll go back and change it so that it doesn't look like it's Part 1, and people will say, well, what happened to Part 2? But I mean, an intelligent person can make the connection between Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning, but it still feels a little bit sort of on its own, doesn't it, by still calling it Part 1. I don't know whether they changed it because would it create an impression that it wasn't the final one. I mean, there are still people out there who say, actually, you know, Tom Cruise will get bored in 6 months' time and he'll come back and there'll be the beyond the Final Reckoning, and that maybe this isn't the last one. But I guess by changing it from Dead Reckoning to Final Reckoning, they certainly were putting out the message that, yeah, sorry guys, but this is it.
Yeah. And that's why, you know, I was trying to remember, and I had to research it, when the first one was 1996. I thought it was a fraction earlier, actually. 1996, the first movie as Tom Cruise as a producer, as well as the actor and so on. And with that, you know, I went in last week. I went the day before the official release. I don't know why. I was a complete sucker for the PR machine. I went, oh, I'm going to go to a previous screening and spend more money than the people the day after. But you go in there with that strange feeling. It's a bit like going to see Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, where you know it's the last one. So it's, you know, I can't wait to speak to you about it, but it's a thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyable adventure. But it still is the last one.
Yeah, and isn't there I mean, I've read the reviews, mixed reviews, to be honest, but isn't there a character who was in the first film in 1996 who actually reappears in this one? So I can't remember what it is. Somebody goes, you should be banished to Siberia or something, and in this film they're in Siberia and there's this guy. I don't know whether that's exactly how it happens, but there's a lovely little sort of gem like that, I think, in the film.
So you have the perfect balance of nostalgia, so that you're rewarding the fans who've been following, you know, the adventures of Ethan Hunt and his different team members since 1996. You get a just reward on that, and he's done well. Actually, it's not like some of the franchise where you kind of, you know, have someone appearing for 10 seconds for the sake of it. But not only that, but then they're part of the big PR machine, and you don't get it. This is done really, really well. What I will say for fans out there is this is definitely a direct follow-up on Dead Reckoning. So it's not like all the others where there were individual stories, you know, Fallout and Ghost Protocol and that kind of things. This one, there's a direct line. So literally, you could watch them back to back, and it's the same story, which is not without these challenges, I would imagine, from a production point of view, because you end up with Act 3 being the duration of the entire movie. So that's kind of interesting. But from the point of view of, you know, the entertainment value, the respect to the franchise, and to the, I suppose, you know, to the loyalty of the fans, the PR marketing campaign, I think, played to that a lot more than I was expecting. And as you're now going to discuss in a moment, it was very much the celebration was a big part of it, but being present to be with the fans. And I don't know what kind of smoothies they will have to drink to have the energy to do this, literally a global tour of premieres and screenings. I'm pretty sure I've missed a lot of them because, you know, I'm only aware what's happened maybe in Europe and the USA. But I saw in the, whether that's the Instagram account, and all the others, you know, one day they're in Mexico, the next day they're here, the next day they're there. I don't think they spend more than 24 hours in the same country globally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely been a world tour, hasn't it? Almost like a like a concert tour, all the big cities. But You know, it's playing upon the nostalgia, but it's also highlighting the sort of ensemble cast. And obviously, Tom Cruise is the big star of the film, but I think there are characters in that who have been in maybe not all of the films, but most of the films, and they're just as popular as Ethan Hunt.
So they had obviously, well, they played to that you could physically, if or online, see the cast and crew. Lots of interviews and performances. They played, of course, to the what Mission Impossible is all about, which is the incredible stunts. And every movie has the stunt that you kind of go, I can't believe they've done that. They played to the tech, filmed in IMAX, and actually Tom Cruise, throughout all the interviews, whether it's on the microphone, on the red carpet, or sat in a studio, was all about, you must go and see this on the big screen, and being a champion of obviously supporting local theatres and making connections with a fan. But like they've done with Dead Reckoning, they kind of gave the big stunts away, So with Dead Reckoning, we had the jump off the cliff, which I saw it again and said, I can't believe that happened, and of course the big train crash. And here we have an incredible underwater sequence. It just, and then of course the stunt hanging on to the wings of the biplanes, which is essentially on the poster itself.
Yeah. I mean, again, I suppose it's a balancing act, isn't it? When I saw the trailers for Dead Reckoning Part 1, and obviously the jump, I think we even did a talk about it on the show, didn't we, at the time? And I think there was a documentary which I might even as put it in as a content spotlight, to be honest, of how they planned that jump off the cliff on the motorbike. But I do remember when I saw the film that even though I'd effectively seen how they set the shot up and how they did it, still seeing it on the big screen for the first time was still a great big wow. So what I'm hoping is that even though they've sort of blown it a little bit with the biplanes and the underwater sequence, I still think it will be a oh my goodness moment when you actually get to see it in reality.
Oh yeah, you can guarantee that. I mean, as I'm listening to you, I've opened the show notes and I'm looking at this poster with the aircraft upside down and Tom Cruise hanging on. It's just incredible. It's a departure, however, if you look at the previous iteration of the film posters, where you had almost a classic hero shot, and then the montage with the Mission Impossible team. This one is almost a departure from that style, and I wonder whether it was a decision again to bring this idea of it's finished, it's the last one, and in a way the posters, this one for Final Reckoning, doesn't follow the same style, design and montage as the others. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, again, as I said, some of the reviews I've read of the film have been quite mixed, and I don't know whether that's just critics deliberately being provocative and saying they hate it just so that they get more clicks than people who say that they like the film. But I do feel that there was an undercurrent in the reviews that this is sort of a massaging of Tom Cruise's ego as opposed to acknowledging the ensemble cast from the past. So if you listen to the critics, you might think, well, the fact that it's only Tom Cruise on the posters this time says a lot about his ego. Now, personally, I don't believe that that's actually the case. I think that it's partly due to the fact that we know that he does his own stunts, and partly because it is the main huge spectacle of the film. So I sort of dismiss that, but that is the feeling that is out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, they're wrong.
Yeah.
From someone that's seen the movie, I think you find that's quite the opposite, paying homage to everything that's happened before in a very, very good way. So there's a couple of things that research I found in the research which I missed completely. So I missed the character posters. This may have been limited to print media, which unfortunately I don't consume as much as I used to. But the one thing that certainly I paid attention to, thanks to social media, was all the premieres. And it feels as though almost every city that they visited had like their special Tom Cruise treatment. And in London, I don't know if you saw it in the news or saw it on the YouTube video, but in London, we ended up with Tom Cruise on top of the BFI IMAX building the night of the preview. Talk about a PR stunt. I mean, literally, with crowds, outside taking pictures, relating it on social media. But they did again a video using a drone shot as well.
Hmm. Hmm. No, I mean, let's face it. I mean, what the critics say aside, and ego aside, Tom Cruise is probably one of the biggest stars we've ever had. Funnily enough, even though we've not seen this film yet, we have been doing a bit of a sort of Tom Cruise binge over the last few weeks. So we watched Risky Business, which was his first film. He was playing a teenager in that, and it's 40 odd years old. A bit like some of the albums that we were discussing earlier. Such a good film, though. Rebecca De Mornay, incredible. We also watched A Few Good Men, which we have reviewed in film marketing in the past. I mean, again, that film is amazing, and Tom Cruise is just fabulous in it. So you have to acknowledge the effect, the sort of stamp he's put on cinema over the last 40 years.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And so, in addition to, I just realized I'm, using the term PR stunt when it's actually a proper stunt. I'm still wondering how he got on top of the BFI IMAX, whether he was dropped by a helicopter and that kind of things. But there was also using London's landmarks and projecting scenes from all the 7 movies prior. That's sometime where I'm very envious of our friends living in London. But I also came across this news where in Edinburgh, in partnership with O2, they had a Mission Impossible booth where you could go and do some stunts and get your picture taken. So all I'm going to say to Paramount Pictures, Tom, if you're listening, and to O2, Roger and I are massive film fans. We've been reviewing films forever. And you need to sort out your marketing, because I need Roger to go to the O2 Mission Impossible booth and get some pictures taken. But there's something about, I think, information on getting to the fans all of the time. And I don't know what the answer is, by the way, Roger, but you'll think that by now, you and I, with the amount of commentary and the amount of sharing on social media, that would be, literally, part of that, kind of data set of let Roger and Pascal know everything that's happening with Mission Impossible.
Yeah, no, it's funny, isn't it? I can be having a think about something bizarre like a special type of fruit or something. Or the other day I was thinking, I quite like having a martini from time to time. And one of the pain in the bum things about making a martini is getting the lemon peel and squeezing the lemon peel over the top to get that lemon zesty taste that you always get from martinis. And I think, wouldn't it be a great idea if somebody had actually created a little bottle of lemon zest that you could just spray on your glass rather than having to mess around with an actual lemon? And that's when you have this moment of, my goodness, Facebook is listening, because lo and behold, within about half an hour, there's an advert for a spray of lemon zest appearing in my Facebook feed. And yet I don't see anything about Mission Impossible at all. And I'm thinking, how is that? How is it that I am a massive film fan and I don't see anything about all of these great films, and yet I have a conversation about something as off the wall and as you could possibly get, wanting to spray lemon zest onto a glass, and within minutes I get an advert served up to me about it. The algorithms are wrong.
They are indeed. And what is interesting, reflecting on Final Reckoning, because it was the last one, I was kind of actually, no, I wasn't even half. I was completely expecting to see some very, very, very clever marketing tactics. And I've reviewed movies where they do some very interactive stuff on social media, where they do treasure hunts, they do all sorts. They have content-rich websites and so on. And again, whether it's to do with this idea of this is the final one, they seem to have gone all in on in-person marketing, if that makes any sense. So you have the numerous premieres and interviews on UK TV, the one that picked up radio. But even, if you look at the US, so there is a two-night show with Jimmy Fallon. And it was a week long of guest appearances from Monday till Sunday. a member of of the cast had their time with Jimmy Fallon, ending with, of course, Tom Cruise as the very, very end. But everybody that was in the movie got their moment under the spotlight. That's a week long of talking about the movie by taking one individual at a time, which I don't think I've seen this before. Normally you have a number of them or all of them, which is very, very chaotic. Something you don't get very good value. And I thought it was just very telling about the sense of celebration that they went for that single appearance a day at a time.
I think, one of my favorite styles of movie marketing, and we've covered this again in previous shows, is using the ensemble cast by creating separate posters for each of the cast members. We've seen it in things like Death on the Nile and Lord of the Rings. And again, this to me cries out for that. Now, yes, of course, they've given each of the members of the cast an interview slot, and that's fine. But I would love to have seen a Hayley Atwell poster, an Eze Morales poster, Gabriel, the baddie, in addition to Tom Cruise. The potential for character-driven marketing with this cast is huge, and yet they seem to have decided that it's not for them this time.
Not for them this time in terms of, I would say, publishing those assets. What we did do was, as you know, from the tour, you're going to hear and see us on TV, on radio. There's been some live streaming on Reddit and that kind of things, but there's not going to be a lot of marketing assets, which is I think is interesting. But building on that, if I had to have one minor grumble about the marketing, but I think it's more to do with the sense of this is the last one. I think this franchise is crying out for the ultimate website experience. 30 years, give or take, of literally film productions of so many anecdotes and so somewhere where you could go in, like they do with 007, where I think Mission Impossible needs that online destination, because you can't let it being spread around 30 odd years all over the internet. You need to have a central point where fans can go back, but also to sustain the history of this franchise, because you don't want this to be lost to the vagaries of Facebook and X and whatever. So I think for me that would be the one thing that they could do, is make sure that they once the dust has settled on the release of Final Reckoning, that they start to bring all this together into that one destination, because the people will want to go back and see what it was like in '96 and that kind of things.
Yeah, even now I'm sitting here in my head, I'm thinking maybe we should just go right back to the start again. It's like when at least there's only 8 of these films. When that thought passes my head and think, should we start watching the Bond films again? You think, that's 25 films you want to watch now, Rog. At least with Mission Impossible, you've only got 8 to sit through. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that, it's quite a daunting task, isn't it? To think I'm going to watch 25 movies, but I'm going to watch 8. Sounds a little bit more navigable, to be honest.
Well, I mean, 8 is more or less what people do with a TV series.
Yes.
TV series nowadays. So, I mean, obviously, on purpose, we are not always, we have a rule when it comes to film marketing. We only look at the point of release day, because after that, you've got, of course, the repurposing of the reviews. You've got fan art that was shared actively. I mean, the one thing about the Mission Impossible franchise, they're very lucky with their social media, because not only do they have obviously the cast and crew, they've got the official Paramount Pictures accounts, they've got the IMAX account, they've got all the different cinemas doing their thing, but Tom Cruise is himself very active on social media, and by pure chance, because again the algorithm are just wrong, I stumbled upon a thank you message from Tom Cruise himself that was released a few days after the opening weekend. And I put it in the show notes for you, just in case, it would disappear. And this idea of, it starts with this weekend was one for the history books. And after that, you've got 4 or 5 paragraphs where he's personally thanking everybody involved, from the filmmakers to the theaters to the producers and so on, and the final kind of paragraph in his thank you message is, and most of all, thank you to audiences everywhere for whom we all serve and for whom we all love to entertain. Sincerely, Tom.
No, that's nice.
Why wouldn't you? Since you've been around the world meeting people, shaking hands, signing autographs, doing all sort of crazy stunts like climbing on top of buildings, jumping off helicopter, you are present. You are part of the celebration. You lead in the celebration, and it will take you a few minutes to write this message. But what I liked as well, just as a, it could have been just a post, but this actually is an image of obviously something that's been crafted on as a document, which I think people can then share and look at again. But I just can't wait for you to see Final Reckoning, so we can discuss more. But for my part, it's a fitting end to the franchise. It's one that with a heavy heart, because you wanted to continue, but we've got to be careful. Tom Cruise is getting on, and he's got other plans, including more Maverick movies and more this and that. And their choice for the marketing of Final Reckoning is to actually use their biggest asset, the people behind the cameras and in front. And congratulations to all of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can't wait to see it. Maybe this weekend.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you all of you for watching and listening to our audio and video magazine. Once again, if you haven't already, please do subscribe and tell others to do so. Leave your comments and suggestions. We do need your contribution and ideas for all our segments, particularly film marketing. But until the next time, go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni, and he was Roger Edwards.